There's a moment most people never mention. Not the loss, not the number that shows up somewhere it shouldn't, not the conversation you rehearse in the shower after something goes wrong. The moment before all of that. The one where something in you already knows and you make the decision anyway. You've been here before. Not somewhere like here. Here. This specific terrain. This exact feeling of being certain. You remember what happened last time. And something in you moves forward regardless. Calm, quiet, completely convinced. Maybe it was a purchase you told yourself was an investment. Maybe it was a financial decision you spent 3 weeks researching and somehow still got wrong. Maybe it was the moment you checked your account balance, already knowing what you were going to see, and refreshed it anyway. That moment is what this is about. Not the mistake, the certainty that lives inside it. Because that moment doesn't belong to people who are careless. It doesn't show up in the lives of people who haven't done the work, haven't read the books, haven't spent real time thinking about this. Intelligent people. It happens with almost eerie regularity to people who know better. And the question almost nobody asks, the one that actually goes somewhere, is why? Not what mistakes smart people make, not a checklist of things to do differently, but why the pattern exists at all. Why someone can understand money, genuinely understand it, and still find themselves in the same place, wearing a different explanation. This is a video about the psychology underneath that, not the behavior, the reason the behavior keeps surviving every attempt to stop it. If you've ever looked at a financial decision you made and thought, I knew better, this is going to be worth staying with. Most people understand one version of financial struggle. Someone never learned how money works. Nobody showed them. They're building something without a blueprint, and the gaps show. That story is real, it's common, and it's not the story this video is telling. This is about someone else entirely. The person who researched that investment for 3 weeks, read the analysis, watched the breakdowns, understood the risk, and bought it anyway, 2 days before it dropped. Not because they didn't know, because somewhere inside all that research, they had already decided. The person who knows exactly how much their lifestyle costs to maintain and takes on more of it anyway. The person who understands compound interest well enough to explain it to someone else and still carries a balance that quietly cancels out everything they're building. The hard part isn't the outcome. The hard part is how familiar it feels, because the pattern, the real one underneath the numbers, has almost nothing to do with what someone knows. Smart people don't make careless mistakes, they make defended ones. Every repeated financial error comes wrapped in an explanation, a context, a set of reasons that feel, in the moment, not just reasonable, but airtight. This time is different. The timing makes sense. I've done the research. I know what I'm doing. The smarter the person, the more complete that explanation sounds, the more evidence gathered, the more confidently the case gets made. And that, exactly that, is where this starts. A psychologist named Leon Festinger spent years watching people make sense of things that couldn't be made sense of. Not money specifically, just people. Holding two beliefs that couldn't both be true, doing things that contradicted what they said they stood for, and then, without appearing to try, resolving the whole contradiction in a way that changed almost nothing about their behavior. He wasn't studying failure, he was studying something ordinary. He called it cognitive dissonance. Set the phrase aside for a second, because this isn't about the label, it's about the experience, which you've already had, probably more than once. Here is what it actually feels like. You think of yourself as someone who is careful with money, intentional, informed. Then you make a decision that clearly contradicts that, and for a brief moment, a few seconds at most, both of those things are true at the same time. The careful, informed version of you, and the decision sitting right in front of you that doesn't match that version at all. Your brain cannot hold both, so it does something remarkable. It doesn't question the decision, it reshapes the story around it. The market was unpredictable. Anyone would have made the same call. It wasn't really about the money. I learned something from it. The adjustment happens inside the same mind doing the adjusting. No alarm goes off, no friction surfaces. The story corrects itself, and the person on the other side of that correction feels entirely rational, because inside the updated story, they are. Here's where it gets specific to intelligent people. The brain doesn't process being financially wrong as data to update on. It processes it as a threat to the version of yourself that made the decision. And when that version of yourself is built around being capable, being informed, being someone who understands how this works, the threat is significant. The mind responds accordingly, not through change, through explanation. The more capable the mind, the more convincing the explanation becomes. And the more convincing the explanation, the more completely the pattern disappears from view. There has never been more financial information available to ordinary people. Podcasts for every strategy, newsletters for every philosophy, analysis, frameworks, competing schools of thought, all of it searchable, streamable, available at any hour to anyone with a phone and half an interest. And there has never been an easier time for a smart person to be selectively informed while feeling entirely informed. Those are not the same thing. Picture this. You make a financial decision. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a doubt forms. So you search. Not openly, not genuinely. You search in the direction you're already leaning. 30 minutes later, you find it. One analyst, one video, one framework that accounts for the doubt and resolves it in your favor. 9 sources said otherwise. 1 agreed, and that 1 becomes the research. This isn't dishonesty. It isn't deliberate. It is simply what a sophisticated mind does when its identity is quietly on the line. And the structure of modern financial content makes this completely frictionless. The things that spread, the videos that get recommended, the posts that perform, tend, on balance, to confirm, to validate, to find the person where they already are and reflect back a version of themselves that made sense. A smart person moving through that environment isn't encountering information. They're encountering mirrors, and every reflection shows the same thing: someone who read the situation correctly, someone who made the right call. The cost that gets talked about is the financial one, the position that didn't work out, the purchase that lost value, the account that would carry a different number if 2 or 3 decisions had gone differently. Those costs are real, and they're measurable, which is part of why they get named and the other cost doesn't. But they aren't the whole cost. Think about the investment account that looks almost exactly the same as it did 3 years ago. Not because nothing happened, because everything that happened got explained away before it could change anything. Think about the financial goal that keeps appearing on the list at the start of every year. Not because the person forgot, because every time they got close, something in the reasoning shifted just enough to make the timing feel wrong. That accumulation, quiet, invisible, reasonable at every step, is not measured in dollars. It's measured in time. Every cycle of this, every loop through the same pattern wearing a new explanation, doesn't only have a financial cost. It costs a year, sometimes longer. A year where the distance between the life you believed your own intelligence would build and the life actually being built extended slightly, quietly, in a direction that's easy to avoid examining, until one day it isn't. The years between knowing and changing. Sit with that for a moment. Because for the person this video is actually about, not the careless person, not the uninformed person, but the capable person who has been through this before. The gap between those 2 points was never a knowledge gap. It was never about information. The knowledge was present. It had always been present. What sustained the pattern was something quieter than that, something with almost no relationship to the spreadsheet itself, and everything to do with what it would require for the person sitting in front of it to finally look at what the numbers were actually saying.
Something happens, not always, but sometimes, when a person has been through a pattern enough times that the explanation starts to feel thin. Not a revelation, nothing that clean, more like a loosening. You look at the same situation you've looked at before, the same numbers, the same story you've told yourself, and this time it doesn't quite hold. Not because anything changed, because you've heard it too many times. And somewhere underneath the familiar explanation, a different question is forming. Not, why did I make that decision? That question has always had an answer ready. It was designed to have one. Something else. What did I need to believe in that specific moment, and why did I need to believe it? Maybe it was the belief that you are someone who doesn't make the same mistake twice. Maybe it was the image of yourself as someone who finally has this handled. Maybe it was simply the need to have been right, just this once, after a long stretch of feeling uncertain. Those aren't character flaws. They're human things. But they are the things that were actually driving the decision, not the research, not the analysis, not the 3 weeks of careful thinking. Intelligence is not the obstacle. The relationship between intelligence and identity is. That realization doesn't arrive with instructions attached. It doesn't come with steps. It lands the way most true things land, quietly and with a certain discomfort, in a moment when the old explanations have stopped doing what they used to do. And the person in that moment isn't someone who finally acquired the right information. They're someone who finally stopped needing the old story to be true.
Come back to where we started. That quiet moment before the decision, before the consequence, before the explanation that would follow. Just the moment in its simplest form. Someone who already knows, moving forward anyway. It looks different now. Not worse, not better, more complete. Because what was happening in that moment wasn't recklessness. It wasn't a gap in understanding. It was the mind doing what minds do, protecting something the person needed to stay intact. The belief that they were capable, the image of someone who had this handled, the story that made the decision feel like the right one before the outcome had a chance to say otherwise. That's not a character flaw. It's a very human thing. Understanding it doesn't revise the past. It doesn't close any of the gaps that are already there. But it changes what the next quiet moment holds. Not an answer, not a correction,
not a system designed to prevent the pattern from forming again. Just a question. Slightly different from the ones that came before it. One that isn't already designed to have an answer. And maybe this time, the actual willingness to hear what it's asking.